Welcome to An Outside View. I'm your host, Dick Zaccaro, and joining me today is Tom Brown. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Zaccaro.
Now, I understand that you're a candidate for a town selectman. Once again, you've run in the past.
Yes,
And right now, there are, I believe, 5 people who pulled papers,
yes, they
for
are.
2 open seats.
Yep,
And thus far, 2 have been certified their papers.
right. Mr.
So-
O'Neill and Mr. Maffey.
Correct. And then maybe we can get into some of your opponents later, how you differentiate from them. But let me start off the show with a little personal biography
Sure.
about you. I think that's key for the viewers to comprehend and understand. And not too many people know this about you, but I'm a good friend of yours, and I happen to know all the volunteer work that you do for this community and other communities. So you're a longtime resident of Walpole, taxpayer, and successful businessman. You grew up in the projects, I believe, in Dorchester?
No, after I was born, we moved to the D Street projects in South Boston.
Okay,
I know you've met my brother.
right,
So, back in 1968, I was one of 7 children, and we were abandoned in the D Street projects by our mother. She abandoned us, and we all got split up back in 1968.
right,
I was taken in by a great family, the Hernan family over in Dorchester, and where I stayed until I joined the service. And it was a great family. They spoiled me rotten, and I got anything that I wanted from them. Great education. It was just a really good experience. But I was always looking for my siblings because we got split up.
right.
And my brother, who you have met, it took me 35 years to find him. Just in the past 6 months, he passed away from bacterial pneumonia and coronavirus and other things.
Right, that was a tough loss.
Yeah, it was really sad. And he lived in Virginia.
Yeah,
And he really would have been happy to know that I found my oldest sister after 52 years, 2 weeks after he passed away. I was working on that with my sister's daughter, who contacted me through Ancestry.com. It's a great thing to see who your relatives are. If you are estranged from them, you might hook up with them, and it worked for me.
that's an amazing story. I mean, you didn't have the easiest upbringings as a lot of children today, but by the good grace and good families that take children and adopt them, you can relate to it, and you had a great, you were raised by a great family.
Right.
And then you made quite a successful business you have in practice in the heating and AC, right?
Yes,
Business.
I have 4 different licenses, and after I got out of the service, I was in the Marines for 6 years. After I got out of the Marines, I went to Wentworth College in Boston for welding, and then I got a job at Boston Gas, where I stayed there for 12 years and went to school basically the whole time. I got my gas fitter's license, oil burner technician's license, and in the last 10 or so years, master sheet metal license and universal refrigeration license.
So those some great accomplishments. Also, for the viewers out there, Tom is an Eagle Scout mentor, volunteers for the Veteran Services, and during COVID crisis and the
Right.
pandemic, I've been with you on a couple occasions where you worked very hard every single day for about 8 to 10 hours a day. You made sure that some of the homeless veterans and not only veterans but other unfortunate families were fed
Right.
by donations, and you worked right out of Gillette Stadium where
Right,
all the food was delivered.
I was approached by Walpole's Ken Southwood, who's also a veteran, a CB, and he asked me if I had some time on my hands to come down and give them a hand. So I agreed, and I went down to Gillette Stadium and assisted with distributing food to veterans through the Mass Military Support Foundation. I actually liked it so much I ended up staying and put my career and my job on hold for 100 days. So I gave them 100 days, every day of the week for 100 days, and I worked in the warehouse unloading trucks, traveling to different cities throughout Massachusetts, distributing food, like up in Worcester to underprivileged children and their families. I drove around Walpole with boxes of food, distributing to homebound veterans. And when we had extra stuff, I brought a few truckloads to the Walpole Fire Department, the police department, and we offered food to the Walpole food pantry, but that was denied. They didn't want any help there, so we couldn't do anything for that. But it's a great program, and they're still helping today. I'm sure they're well over 5 million meals that they've
That's
distributed.
unbelievable.
So-
I totally commend people like yourself volunteering countless hours, putting your own personal business on hold
Right.
to serve others. So you would be great in the public service business as a select person representing the residents of this town. Now, tell me a little bit about, I understand you're a recipient of a citation for public service commitment by the Boston City Police Department. Could you tell the viewers a little bit about that?
Sure. I was driving down Cambridge Street in Boston one morning, and I just was stuck in traffic. And I just happened to be looking around, and I observed an incident happening on the sidewalk where an elderly woman was being mugged. And I couldn't believe it, so I jumped out of my car and gave chase to the perpetrator, and I actually caught him down in Faneuil Hall, apprehended him, got the woman's possessions back. It was her 50th wedding anniversary present that she
Wow.
got from her husband. It was a really nice gold chain, and I had to see the whole thing through. I had to go to court because I apprehended the guy, and he ended up getting, I think, 7 years in prison because he had outstanding warrants on him as well. So, yeah, the Boston police, after the court case, they presented me with a community service award.
That's terrific.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Unfortunately, a lot of people, unlike yourself, would just stand by and witness it without doing anything,
Well,
taking any action.
That's funny you said. I mean, on that morning, she was on the sidewalk. There was a lot of people walking by, just watching it. They did not get involved.
Right.
you know.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah, it really is.
Unbelievable.
That's it happens.
So let's switch gears a little and talk about, your campaign platform, what you stand for. I know in the past you're an RTM as well. You've been an RTM now for several terms.
Right, town meeting member, yep.
Right.
Precinct 6.
Precinct 6, and in the past campaigns, you run as a fiscally conservative candidate.
Right, I haven't waived from my platform, which is responsible spending, transparency, and accountability. I would think that all the citizens of Walpole would demand that from their elected officials. I haven't been successful, but I've come close. With we typically have a very low turnout here in Walpole. For a 15% turnout, they consider that good. That tells me 85% of the people, the eligible voters, don't show up to vote. It could be because of the time of year that it happens.
Which is
June.
first Saturday in June.
Right, and typically a lot of people do go away. I think we should have the townwide election in the fall, early fall, but that would take a charter change.
Right. A couple of exceptions to low voter turnout. During presidential elections, it seems like a lot more people come out during national elections, and also when they have an override, a lot of times they'll have an override of Proposition 2.5. As a matter of fact, it's my understanding now that after the state certifies school funding, which is in August, they're going to have a separate election in the town calling for an override of somewhere between 180 million to 200 million, which, by the way, the state generally pays about 75% of school costs, but in this situation, they're only going to pay about 33% because of COVID and the state revenues are up.
Right.
So they're going to be calling for a special election, I believe, in the fall. What's your take on that? And usually a ton of people come out for an override, and usually they're voted down.
Well, I would say that's by plan. They really want this override to pass, and what's to say they don't have it on the last weekend in August? Yeah.
Right.
And,
Once the schools, once the state comes
yeah.
out.
And now they're going to be adding cost to the taxpayers to hold a special election.
Right.
Okay, so put it on the ballot for June.
Right, and we looked into that. That's a great point for you viewers out there. The last presidential election that coincided with the town election it was quite expensive. It was about $140,000 to run that election. But town elections supposedly usually run for somewhere around $25,000 and up. So
Right.
they'll be spending an additional $25,000 of the
Right.
taxpayers' money to hold this special election for an override of
Right.
Proposition 2.5.
Well, I could start right here with some cost savings. Put
I
it
was
on
gonna-
put it on the June election, and we'll save $25,000.
Good point. Good point. Which brings me up to our next topic of conversation. I'm glad you mentioned cost-saving revenue enhancement programs. I like to refer to them. So we've discussed in past shows a couple ways that the town could save millions of dollars
Right.
where they wouldn't have to go up every year to the full 2.5%
Which
tax
the-
levy under Proposition 2.5.
Which they are doing this year. Okay, so
Let's get into some of the
so some of the
cost-saving
things
measures.
that I've mentioned on my last run for town select board was zero-based budgeting. All right, we could save a lot of money with zero-based budgeting. We could save a lot of money that we've currently brought to light again was joining the state healthcare and the state retirement funds. Okay, that would save us a lot of money because if they really want to get a new school, I think what we should do is we should be exhausting all avenues of savings here in town. Wherever we can save money, we should be doing it. And those are proven avenues right there that will save us millions of dollars. Also, on top of that, I would advocate for operational audits. My time on the Water and Sewer Commission, we actually got through a vote by the other commissioners, an operational audit on the indirect costs, which are currently now upwards of about $1.5 million that Water and Sewer pays the town of Walpole in indirect costs.
Right.
All right. We passed that operational audit by vote. We handed it over to the town administrator. My term was up that following year, and from what I understand, after talking to a few of the other commissioners, that operational audit was never done.
Wow. Do you know why it wasn't done?
Because there's a lack of accountability in our town government. Maybe they have something to hide, I have no idea.
Right, so other ways, let's get back, you mentioned the town joining the state retirement system.
Right.
I had Richard Peeler, also a fellow RTM in the past on, and he filed 3 initiatives with the FinCom committee.
Right.
And I participated on an hour-and-a-half conference call with him to help him out because that was my background, professional background. So by virtue of joining the state retirement system, you have to be your own independent retirement system. You have to have a retirement board. So we approached the state legislator
Right.
who represents certain precincts in Walpole, Sean
Dooley.
and he's
Right.
going to file some legislation to allow this to happen, which will save the taxpayers millions of dollars in excess appropriations that won't be needed because the state gets a higher rate of return traditionally year after year after year going back 35 years.
Right.
Also, you mentioned joining the state GIC as opposed to a regional healthcare program, and there's strength and volume discounts and numbers, and
Right.
the state has 450,000 employees compared to only a minute portion of that for Walpole.
Right. You get a higher rate of return. It's not rocket science.
And it's the same with the OPEB, the other post-employee benefits, which
Right.
is
Where
basically...
are those funds being
We've
invested?
asked at several town meetings. I know that I've approached, I get up myself during town meetings and I inquired of Jim Johnson, the town administrator,
Right.
what he was investing these funds in. So,
He's still
there-
looking into it.
yeah, every time he says we're looking into it, but traditionally, a lot of towns will just invest them in local banks getting 0.25% interest when they could be using a more aggressive, diversified plan like the state treasurer has that gets 8, 9, 10% even.
Right.
And I believe the Plymouth County treasurer also came up with a similar trust that these administrators in town government should take advantage of, because once again, the more they earn on investments, the less they have to appropriate
Right.
and tax dollars to fund these programs.
That's right. And then some of these things can be done by a stroke of a pen from Jim Johnson. Okay?
Right. Yeah, they don't need special legislation to
Right.
join the state GIC
right.
healthcare plan or the state investment vehicle for OPEB. That's low-hanging fruit. They can do that immediately and realize savings for the taxpayers.
Right. But it seems like the easy road to go always is to just tax to the max.
Right. And also a lot of towns, Walpole included, every year they have surplus unused cash and they roll it over to the next budget year after year after year, and they just replenish the budget by going up the full 2.5% in property taxes, and the assessed values
Right.
have been increasing. So it's a double whammy. Matter of fact, I just did some research.
Yeah, upwards
And-
of 4%.
Right. So exactly 3.87% in
Right.
taxes since 2019, which is the 2.5 maximum tax levy on real estate property.
Yeah.
And then the addition is accounted for with the increase in assessed values of the homes, which is good if you sell your home, but if you don't,
Right.
you're going to pay a lot more in taxes.
So here's the kicker on that now. So if we're averaging almost 4% tax increase a year on your property,
Right.
what is 150 million, 180 million override going to do to your property taxes?
It'll drive it right through the roof.
All right?
And especially that'll affect and impact people on limited income, the
Absolutely.
elderly. And in addition to that, I'm hearing talk that there's a CPA tax that's going to come out, which is a Community Preservation Act that calls for protection of open spaces and also mandates inclusionary zoning, which was voted down at the last town
Right.
meeting.
The CPA tax, which is the Community Preservation Act, is basically a washed-up program. All right? They used to get dollar for dollar from the state. Now it's like a dollar. So a dollar, the state will give you like 10 cents. Okay? Those funds have been proven to be misused. Okay? Nancy McKenzie has asked for it a few times. Last year at the League of Women's Voters, Mark Gallivan, he said if it was presented to him, he would vote for it. So the CPA tax is, like you said, a 3% increase on top of the 2.5%. And then you're going to get your assessed values. So now you're looking at a guaranteed almost, 7% increase a year on your
Right.
property taxes?
Yeah.
Where are these people coming from?
So the average, we looked at some demographics in town, and 25% of the town population in Walpole, believe it or not, makes over $250,000 or more.
Wow.
So I'm sure those people aren't impacted as
Not
much
yet.
as some of the people that are moving out of town or the elderly on limited fixed income, as we pointed out.
So I have been reviewing some of the literature that's out there, and a lot of people talk about, the elderly in town and how they want to do like elderly housing. How about letting them stay in their own house and afford their own house? They don't want to get into apartment buildings and things like that,
Right.
Don't you think they'd like to stay in their own homes
Yeah, and
and afford their own homes?
absolutely.
How about we do like a freeze
Right.
for retired and elderly citizens?
Right. And another factor we brought up when Mr. Peeler was on my show, the last Outside View, was on inclusionary zoning that calls for 20% of any new complex or apartment buildings to be built. You have to have 20% affordable housing in
Right.
there. So this will have a negative impact on surrounding property values, because if
Absolutely.
someone qualifies for affordable housing, they pay a lot lesser amount than their next door neighbor's house goes for.
That's right.
And when they sell it, the federal government has a stipulation they can't sell it for any more. So the developers are going to get hit, and also the surrounding residencies will get hit when they sell their house.
And we're looking at, or supposedly there's a big, huge 40B being proposed for South Walpole. That's going to have a huge impact on our infrastructure. All right, we have a 12-inch, I believe it's a 12-inch sewer main going down Washington Street. And people need to look into that, because we've had hotels that were built on Route 1 that tied into that 12-inch sewer main.
Right.
All right, so our infrastructure is going to be hit really big. And who's going to pick that up? The ratepayers.
Right.
All right, are they going to force the developer of the project to pay for a new sewer main all the way down Washington Street? I don't think so.
Right. Now, let's talk about that new apartment complex they put downtown.
Right,
So that is not an affordable housing project.
right. Not
Do you
yet.
know, do you know the status of that? I mean, I don't see many people coming in and out of there, and there's quite a few apartments there, and they're not cheap. They go for about $2,400 a month.
Well, I mean, I don't know the owners of those buildings. I have talked to a few people that have, they've told me that only 75 apartments have been rented between the two. So who knows how long those owners can afford to not have those apartments filled. Typically what happens in situations like that is they will approach the state and get guaranteed money with
Right.
Section 8
Correct.
and other avenues, and
Right.
they'll fill those apartments somehow.
Right.
Like you said, it's $2,900 for rent in one of
Right.
those apartments. I think that's pretty steep.
Yeah, it is. I mean, people probably don't even pay to have their mortgage on their homes.
Yeah, well, I've been
And
in
they
town.
own their homes, and they get equity and appreciation. This,
Right.
they just be renting. There's
Right.
no equity or appreciation there.
Yeah, but you're close to the T. You can hop right on the T and get into
Right.
Boston.
Correct. And also, it's going to impact town services. You're going to probably need more schools, more teachers, more public safety, firefighters, police.
Right. I'm just hoping that when they did complete those two buildings, they used a lot of energy-saving ideas,
Right.
like in the water, electricity, things like that. But yeah,
So you
They're there.
have some great revenue enhancement programs that you, I'm sure, would fully endorse if you were elected as a town selectman. And they all make sense to me, and it would impact our taxes drastically, and they wouldn't have to go up to the full 2.5%.
that they've done
Year
year
after
after year after year. When was the last time they didn't go up to the full 2.5%, I wonder?
It'd be interesting to look at, but we had a similar situation in Brockton, and we started an organization called BLT. It was acronym for, like, not a BLT, bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, but it stood for Broctonians for Limited Taxation.
Yeah.
And we were successful, by the way. We had about 250 members. We publicized it. We year after year,
Right.
we went before the city council and asked the CFO if he'd be willing to use some of that surplus cash. And they always had 18 to 25 million dollars of unrestricted cash that they could use. And we were successful several years getting them to lower the 2.5% tax levy to 1.5%. So our efforts did not go unnoticed, and we were successful.
Well, you had the backing from the people, and they showed up
Right.
and
So
demanded action.
right. So I think you viewers out there, if and when you watch this show, take heed of what we're saying, and you should contact your local representatives and select people.
Right.
So let's switch gears a little. I've been a resident now for, I believe, about 6 years in Walpole. It's tough to believe that time goes by so fast when you're having fun.
Right.
I met a lot of good people like yourself and others in the town. I've been active as an RTM, and I serve on a couple of boards. Right now, I serve on an elderly tax relief program where if you make less than $40,000 a year, you're eligible for a $1,000 tax credit towards your town real estate taxes. So I'm also running, by the way, for the Town Assessors Board this year. But I've been seeing a lot of signs on lawns since I moved here that say there's no room for hate in our town. Down in the CVS Plaza off Main Street, there's like a utility flashing sign that's put up, usually is men at work, potholes, be careful. But this sign says there's no room for hate in our town, and also respect your neighbor. And I also understand that the select board is now looking at commissioning a study through a consultant, spending upwards of $55,000 to $65,000, how to be less perceived as being racist. But since I've been in this town, I've seen no acts really of discrimination that I know of in the streets or hate. However, why don't you give us your viewpoints of that subject?
Well, I have read this. I read the story that came out in the media yesterday about the study that the town wants to do about diversity and race relations and stuff like that. They're going to hold classes with each department and all that, right? So
Who's driving this? The personnel department? Is that one of the functions, or is it mandated by federal government, state government?
I think it's
I mean,
I think somebody approached the town and
But
asked.
should, all towns and governments should be equal opportunity employers, correct?
Right, I mean.
And a lot of times they actually have a mandate of how many minorities that you have to hire for a town. So what is the
Right.
situation in our town right
So after I read that story yesterday, I approached a few people in town that work for the town, and I just asked them a simple question. I said, how many people of color work for your department? They were shocked. They said, none. All right? So how many people of color work at Town Hall? Do you have any idea?
I've been in there several times.
0. How many in the school department? I mean, we got a lot of people that are elected here in town, and nobody's ever
Right.
looked at this. How many people of color work in the school department? How many minority teachers do we have? How many? I've talked to a water and sewer commissioner. How many people of color and work for the water and sewer department?
Public safety.
Public safety.
DPW.
Yeah, the DPW, Parks Department, Highway Department. I mean,
Right.
they really got a problem. So usually on the weekend, when you're driving through the center of town, you see Black Lives Matter
Right.
down the center of town, standing out in front of the Raven's Nest and Tessie's, right?
Right.
And who's leading that group? Phil Chikarowski. Okay? So why isn't Phil Chikorowski down there standing out in front of Town Hall demanding equal justice for our citizens here in Walpole?
That's a valid point.
Um,
As a matter of fact, I'd like to,
Here's another group that Phil Chikorowski sponsors, is the Peace and Justice Group in Walpole.
the social
This is an
justice-
incident that happened to me and a bunch of other, well, 6 other veterans that were out back in January last year. After when the United States took out that Iranian general Soleimani. So we were down there to show support for our military, our veterans and stuff like that in the center of town. And Phil Chikorowski's group was over on the other corner. And 2 of those people that were participating yelled out to me and the group that I was with, "The only good Marine is a dead Marine." I was horrified by that.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. So they denied it, and I sent a message to Phil Chikorowski, who, by the way, had left their standout prior to that incident. So it was only 2 or 3 of them standing there, and it was Jeremiah Hussein that said that. Okay, and I confronted him a few weeks later at a store in Walpole, and I personally walked up to him and asked him what he had to say for himself now, and he absolutely said nothing. So
Yeah,
here's a guy that's full of hate, okay, spewing that kind of hatred, which is just unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
And I would say he was spineless.
And a lot of servicemen, both men and women, sacrifice the ultimate sacrifice of giving their lives up for our freedom and democracy in this
That's right.
country.
That's right.
You know, I have to share a similar story while we're on this topic. A lot of times I go on the different Walpole sites to gauge the activity that's going on. And there was one big controversy about the school committee changing the sports team's name from Rebels because they said there was racial overtones to that there was
Right.
a lot of black people that got killed, people of color during the Civil War, as well as many other people got killed.
Right.
So I said the irony here is the fact that, first of all, the players that participate on these sports teams, they have no say in what they want to be called. So the school committee determined that it was racial and they should be referred to maybe as the Walpole sports teams. So I got into it with this one woman and I said, you know, realistically and more importantly, you know, why don't you people promote minorities in the school department as you brought that up? And then she retorted back to me that a person of color wouldn't want to work for this town. And I said, well, I don't know what your point is there, but I guarantee you that if you advertise a job for a teacher's aide making $80,000, $90,000 a year,
Yeah. I mean,
with
I don't know
full
what-
benefits, retirement, and health insurance benefits,
Right.
I think a lot of people, period, of color and all colors would apply for a job like that.
Well, you gotta remember, in a small town like Walpole, the tree of nepotism is strong and healthy.
Right.
I mean-
and most governments today.
Well, tell us your own story about the time when you
yeah, I
when
would-
you applied for a position in town hall, and you're a Native American Indian.
Correct, yeah. I'm part Native American and actually enrolled with the Oglala Sioux tribe where my mother grew up
Right.
in South Dakota in Pine Ridge. So I'm, virtue of her son, I'm enrolled in the tribe as well. So I applied for a benefits coordinator position job that was created to assist employees with their retirement options when they retired.
Right.
So I went on the interview.
And you have a strong background in that industry.
Yeah, and the personnel director ironically couldn't participate in the interview because her daughter was a candidate for the position as well. So there was a conflict of interest. That's one of the ethics questions about nepotism. So she couldn't participate.
Right.
And they kind of said that I was overqualified and that I would get bored easy for the job, with the job. But,
That was their out? You're overqualified?
Yeah,
I mean,
and-
you are an author of a book.
right, but that seems to be a standard cop-out. When you hear you're overqualified,
Right.
the signals, red signals go up. But in any event, I guess they did hire the daughter of the personnel director in the end. So I'm not saying she's not doing a good job, but her background was a teacher. But I guess hopefully things are working out there.
Well, hopefully it wasn't because you're a Native American Indian.
I don't think that was the case.
You nev-
Hopefully not. I
I
hope
mean-
not.
You never know. Here's another cost-saving idea. Instead of spending $60,000 for a diversity study, why don't they just open their eyes and look around? Look around at these departments. You
Right.
don't need to spend $65,000 for somebody to tell you that you need to be more diverse when
Right.
you're hiring.
Right. Well, I know when you were a water and sewer commissioner and chairperson that you did your best to keep water rates down
Right,
in the town.
right.
So
Well,
it sounds to me with your platform, you'll do the same if you're elected as a select person.
I will look into every avenue to keep the tax rates down. When I was a water and sewer commissioner, we were able to keep proposed water and sewer rates down through discussion amongst the commissioners and using retained earnings. Okay? Since I left the water and sewer department board, the rates have skyrocketed. All right, there's a they have a new billing cycle. What is it called? Inclining block rate. All right, that was adopted by Mr. Abbott. So Mr. Abbott designed it. When he was selling it to the other commissioners, it was supposed to lower the average water bill for the residents and the ratepayers of Walpole. So from what I understand, when he presented his billing cycle to the powers to be at Town Hall, they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So that was, they demanded he change that. So
Right.
he changed it, and now the commercial rate is lower than the residential rate.
Wow, that's
So,
unbelievable.
yeah, so the average ratepayer in Walpole has seen their water rates go through the roof.
Right.
So I wonder what Mr. Maffey has done about that. Another thing, I mean, I could talk about people's records, like Mr. O'Neill's and Mr. Maffey's. I don't know about the other candidates, their records. But Mr. Maffey, while he was on the Water and Sewer Commission, what was told to me was that people that, or groups that use Jarvis Farm, which was purchased by water funds at the tune of $4.5 million. So people,
What was it assessed at, the land?
well, I got all
What
the
was it-
paperwork on
What was the
that,
appraised value of it?
around $700,000.
So that's substantially more the purchase price.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, that's a,
Did it
that,
have, did it
that's,
have oil on the property?
I've tried to dig into that for the last few years. There was supposedly another offer on the table for the property, and Jim Johnson couldn't produce the other offer. So the offer on the table was around $2 million. He claims there was another offer for the property, and they jumped it up to $4.5 million. But he could never produce the other offer. All right? So I don't know what happened with that. He could never produce it. He couldn't produce the video of the purchase being presented to town meeting either.
So that's one of your platforms, you're calling for full accountability and
Right.
transparency.
We need transparency and accountability. The purchase of Jarvis Farm, in my opinion, was one of the biggest boondoggles ever in this town. All right. Granted, it's a nice park and stuff like that. There's a pond on there, but the Sharon Country Day summer camp. So, anyways, they bought it for water protection. Okay. So, what happened prior to the purchase? Was there a big concern for water protection from that area? Because
Right.
Sharon Country Day was adding tons of chemicals to that pond.
Right.
There was no concern then.
And I've been hearing a lot lately, I'm glad you brought that point up, that could be some pollution in the town waters, and a former select person brought up, make sure these wells are capped good too. I don't know if there's validity in that, or what's going on.
When I was Water and Sewer Commissioner, there was, I was made aware of a couple of spills that are being remediated here around town. So they are on top of everything. But as far as contaminated water now, I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
Well, hopefully, if you're successful in your bid to get elected as a town select person, that's a new word, select person, you can maybe bring back some of these deals and audits that you call for. Maybe you can
Operational audits
reactivate
will, I believe, when you look into the funds and you have operational audits by an independent outside firm, you will find savings.
All right, so we're winding down. We got about 5 or so, 10 minutes left. So I believe camera 1, if you want to look into that camera and if you want to summarize some of the points that we went over, is why the voters in the town of Walpole should consider voting for you on Saturday, June 5th as a select person.
Well, my past platforms and my current platform is the same. Transparency, accountability, and responsible spending. I've always been fair. When I was Water and Sewer Commissioner, I was very fair with the ratepayers. I always looked for ways to save the ratepayers' money, lower the rates, used retained earnings, and I always sided with people that come in and looked for help with their water bills. I figured if you took the time to go out of the way to come to the meeting and argue your case, I'm gonna help you out. So I would ask that people in town, the eligible voters, please come out June 5th, and I would be humbled by your vote. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate that. Another thing that I would like to mention in closing, there's a Walpole citizen by the name of Mike Lowry. He passed away from cancer, and he has got 3 small children. I was on Facebook this afternoon and read the story on that. It's very sad, and there's a GoFundMe site on that, and I would just ask if anybody could help out in any way they can to please consider donating to that. They have some serious bills to catch up on, and I know they're going to need the help. It's very sad. So thank you again for your time, Mr. Zaccaro. I appreciate it, and maybe I can come back before the election and give an update on my campaign.
Sure, and I want to thank you for mentioning that GoFundMe page. I follow a lot of these GoFundMe on Facebook as well, and that's a great cause, a worthy cause. And you're very generous and gracious. I've seen you many times contribute, and I'm a dog lover myself, and I just recently lost 2 of my 4 Yorkies. They lived good lives. So one made it to 15,
yeah.
The other one was going to be 17, and
I'm sorry for your loss.
yeah, thank you. And during my birthday, I always create a GoFundMe. They ask you who would you like people to donate to on your birthday. So I always have an animal rescue shelter
Right.
as well. So I want to thank you very much for coming on the show, and you brought up some valid points, and I wish you the best of luck in the upcoming race. And for you viewers out there, spring town meeting is coming up, I believe, in May.
Right.
Maybe the first week of May, and I don't know where they're going to hold it this year. In the past, it used to be right here in this high school where the studio is, in the auditorium, but because of COVID and extra precautionary measures they took, they've been holding it the last couple of meetings at the football stadium in the outdoors. So, you know, maybe you want to come down if you can in person and view how town meeting is run and some of the articles that are going to be on that impact your daily lives and also your taxes.
Right, and I do know that there's quite a few new RTMs that have pulled papers to represent the citizens of Walpole.
Right, and that's a good point. The town clerk's office, you can obtain your nomination papers up to April 14th, and then they have to be due back by April 16th, 2
Right.
days later. So if you're running for RTM, there are
Yep.
8 precincts,
You'll need 25 signatures.
25 valid signatures.
Right.
And if you run for town-wide office,
50.
like I'm doing for the town tax assessors board, you need 50, double the signatures.
Right,
So, you know, get involved with your community. If you're not happy with the way things are run, you know, you might want to come out and run yourself to get your viewpoints across. And there's about 150 RTMs in this town, and they vote on all the articles at spring and fall town meetings. And you need a 2/3 majority vote to get an article in.
right. One thing that I do recall seeing, there's another article on there to ban plastic bags.
Right?
All right, plastic bags, they want to ban that in Walpole.
Right.
Do you remember back in the day when plastic bags were introduced to do away with paper bags? Because paper bags were gonna, you know, kill in the forests
Right.
and we're gonna save the trees. Well, now we've gone full circle. Now we're back to paper bags.
Unbelievable. And also, isn't there a solar initiative as well, a solar farm
Oh yeah, that's a good
in
point.
town?
So I brought up an alternative to the North Street site. Why not the Lincoln Road landfill? I was told by certain people in town hall, or a certain person, that the Lincoln Road landfill wasn't properly capped. So I have a friend at the State Department of Environmental Protection. I asked him about it, and he asked me where it was and stuff. So he pulled the file on it, and he sent it to me. And the Lincoln Road landfill was capped properly. They didn't have any issues with that. It was signed off by the state.
Right.
So, and there's already high tension wires going through there, so the power being generated from a solar farm at Lincoln Road could be just hooked up to those high tension wires.
Right.
But the North Street site, they would put these panels on another part of the property up there, and then they would have to bulldoze, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile to the high tension wires. I mean,
Right.
we've already got the site right there at Lincoln Road.
Right. You know, going
And
back
they put those panels on ballasts. They don't
Right.
penetrate the cap.
Right, and they want to put on a farm of aesthetic values.
Right, I mean,
Right.
the Lincoln Road, I mean, the North Street area is a beautiful area, and it should be kept as that. I mean,
Right.
open space, I mean, it's a great area.
Yeah, that reminds me years ago, a good friend of mine, he's a retired emergency room doctor, and Dave Cowens of the Celtics,
Right.
and reporter Harvey Robbins, they all fought the Prowse Farm. They fought Meditech coming in, Meditech to take over the Prowse Farm, which is a beautiful horse farm in Canton.
Right,
And Governor Dukakis was the governor at the time, and he gave them their word up until the 11th hour he would not sell out to big corporations and ruin the aesthetic values of the Prowse Farm. So what he did basically, he left a small parcel of land for Prowse Farm, and he sold the other land to I believe it was Meditech, the company.
really. Up on,
Yeah, it was
where's
right-
that, University Ave?
Yeah, I think
Westwood.
it's right off of 138.
Oh, yeah.
The Prowse Farm, yeah. But it's unbelievable. You did mention Phil Chikorowski prior. Isn't he the individual that's also backed this green energy mandate that by the year 2035 or whenever that Walpole has to go all green,
I mean-
alternative energy?
I mean,
What's your viewpoints on that?
my viewpoints on that is, I'm all for energy conservation. I own a heating and air conditioning business. I install high efficiency heating and air conditioning equipment, and it's you know, it's going to save money, it's going to save energy and all that. But he's a little late bringing that out here into Walpole because we just completed a new fire station, a police station, senior center, right?
Right.
And the library. Are those all green certified buildings?
I believe not. So what would they have to convert them all? And what cost would that be to the taxpayer?
From what I hear, the electric bill at these new places is 3 times what it was on the old buildings.
Unbelievable. As President Trump always used to say during his presidency, he talked about alternative energy and green energy. He says, what are you going to do on days when the wind stops blowing or the sun's not out?
Right.
And he made valid points. It's an
Well, we've seen
okay
what happens.
alternative source, supplementary.
Right.
Supplementary.
Right. It's
source
good. It's
of
good.
power.
It's a good redundant source of power. So you could cut back on your fossil fuels and utilize wind and solar. I know they are making strides in those industries for better panels and windmills and stuff, but the payback on those is almost none.
And the other thing that stuck out in my mind, I'll never forget President Trump when he said, he looked in the camera, I think it was one of the last debates with Hillary Clinton, and he said, you know, folks, you know what you have now. If you vote for me, what do you have to lose? And that spoke volumes to me.
It did. Well, what do you have to gain by voting me in? Is to keep more money in your bank account. Because
I like that.
I'm gonna save you some money.
I always used to like the campaign slogan and adage, a vote for me is a vote for you,
That's right.
and your better interests.
I will explore every avenue to save the taxpayers money,
Well, on that note,
while keeping good services in town.
I'm sure you will. If you served your country proudly as a United States member of the Marine Corps,
Right.
and you also serve homeless veterans and unfortunate people, I'm sure you lead as a selectman with the same amount of dedication and public service.
I will.
So on that note, I want to thank you very much and for coming on the show. Wish you the best of luck in your campaign and get involved, people out there, as much as you can. And stay safe, and remember, all lives matter.
That's right.
Thank you, Tom, and best of luck.
Thank you.